Dustin Lance Black, the Academy Award-winning screenwriter of Milk, and Chad Griffin, president of the Human Rights Campaign. And also joining us is Julian Epstein, former chief Democratic counsel to the House Judiciary Committee. Lance Black, I just have to ask you, as a dramatist sitting in that room full of drama today, what were you most struck by?
Oh, I mean, being in that courtroom, it's storytelling at its most epic. I think what I've learned most in this whole process, this 4-year process, is that the courts are such a wonderful place for gay and lesbian people to tell our stories, because unlike ballot initiatives, the opposition actually have to come into court and testify under oath. And if they're caught lying, they're called out for those lies. And it's just a great place for gay and lesbian people to tell our truth. And you know, that's really how we've made all this progress so quickly, is telling our personal stories so that people get to know us, that they know us. So you know, it was the ultimate in beautiful, liberating storytelling.
Chad Griffin, for those of us who were not in the courtroom, who didn't have that honor today, it was quite striking to see your lawyers come out and tell us that there really was no defense offered that they heard on the notion of forbidding gay people from marrying each other.
Lawrence, there never has been. Since the day that we filed this case and that historic trial happened nearly 4 years ago, we set out to prove 3 things, and that's exactly what was before this court. That marriage is a fundamental constitutional right that this court has found on 14 occasions. There is grave harm done to our plaintiffs and those like them and their families in the state of California. And third, and perhaps most important, and something that counsel for our opposition had a hard time with today, there is absolutely no harm done by allowing same-sex couples the right to marry. It doesn't hurt anyone down the street. It doesn't hurt a neighbor or another straight couple. And that's exactly what we heard once again in court today, and they continued to struggle countering those 3 points.
Julian Epstein, what do you think was the legal linchpin in the day?
It is a fascinating and very complicated case, Lawrence, because there are as many as 7 different outcomes here. If the court wants to arrive at a decision on the merits, it could find that there's an equal protection guarantee to same-sex marriage in 50 states, which I think is the only coherent equal protection reading. It could find that there's an equal protection guarantee for same-sex marriage in the 8 states that have civil unions, which is a position of the Obama administration. It could find that there is a constitutional protection just in California, consistent with what the 2 lower courts had held, or it could find, in fact, that there's no constitutional guarantee to same-sex marriage. The problem is that there aren't 5 votes for any of those positions. So I think what it looks like right now is that the court is moving to actually dismiss the case. And even if it dismisses the case, it can do it on one of 3 different possibilities. It could find that there's no standing. It could find that the case was improvidently granted, and that's improvidentially granted, which is a complex way of saying the court shouldn't have taken the case in the first place. Or it could find that it doesn't want to arrive at the decision for other reasons on its merits. And I think the likelihood here is that you'll see Kennedy kind of kick the can down the road, punt on this, if you will, and join with the 4 liberals and throw the case out, find that it was improvidently granted, which in the end of the day will mean it's a victory for California because Proposition 8 will be vacated, but it still leaves the elephant in the middle of the room as to whether or not there is an equal protection guarantee for same-sex marriage, and that, of course, will also be part of the case tomorrow in the DOMA arguments.
Well, yeah, Lance, that is front and center in tomorrow's argument, it seems like.
Well, I'm telling you, I do not think that this fight is done for any of us until we have full federal equality. You know, if you look back 30-plus years to Harvey Milk, who was taken from us, he started talking about, right before his assassination, taking this fight federal. And that means that, you know, in my case, I have a big brother who came out to me when we were shooting Milk, and I love my big brother, but when he came out to me, he didn't sound hopeful like I did. I came out in California. He came out in Virginia, and he didn't have laws protecting him, and he didn't see a future where he'd have freedom or have his love, his future marriage, his future family respected and protected, and that's a tragedy. And he passed away never knowing what it feels like to be a full American. That is why we are taking this federal. That's why none of us are going to be happy and satisfied until we have all 50 states And I think that hearing those arguments in front of the nation today and understanding that all Americans deserve full equality and full recognition and protection of their relationships, I think this is moving the narrative forward at a great pace, and that Americans understand that this has to be a federal issue now.
I think that's exactly right, Lawrence. And Justice Hand used to have Learned Hand had a famous saying that law in the justice system is really the dead hand of the past. And what he meant by that was that the laws in the judicial system represented the values and the mores of the earlier generation. And that's the existential question the court has faced at, because as was pointed out, I think that marriage equality is going to be the law of the land because of what's going to happen at the ballot box than perhaps inside the Supreme Court. And the question the court has to really reckon with now is there a valid, at some point they're going to have to deal with the equal protection challenge, which, as I said, Kennedy's trying to avoid right now. But when they deal with that, regardless of what level of review, discussed on the show before, there are 3 levels of review when you get into equal protection analysis. You still have to make an argument, the opponents of same-sex marriage, that there's some rational government reason for denying same-sex marriages. And the most interesting thing in today's court was when the proponent, when Cooper tried to make the case as to why there is a government interest in banning same-sex marriages, he really couldn't articulate one. And that's the astonishing thing right now. The arguments made on behalf of the opponents of same-sex marriage are really, in many ways, quite laughable today, which is a dramatic change from where we were in 2008.
Chad, let me ask you, with your legal team in there today, what do you think they saw as the things that give them the most encouragement and the clearest signals about how to argue their case tomorrow?
Look, I am not a pundit or a legal scholar, so I think I will better leave that to Julian to articulate what those justices, what one could read or perhaps not read. But I know from our perspective, having Ted Olson and David Boies in that courtroom today, a Republican and a Democrat representing those 4 plaintiffs and their families who were seated before those justices, we couldn't have had a better team in there articulating why Proposition 8 is unconstitutional and why it should be erased from our books forever. And I know that those who are working so hard to make the case for DOMA and to make the case that DOMA is unconstitutional, and how Edie Windsor, the plaintiff in that case, was treated when her wife, Thea, passed away, and she received a $360,000 estate tax bill simply because they were a same-sex couple. That's outrageous. That is outrageous, and we look forward to seeing those arguments tomorrow. I will again be in that courtroom tomorrow and look forward to hearing that case made as well.
Lance, are you going to be in the courtroom tomorrow?
I won't be there tomorrow. I'm certainly going to be paying attention. I think the wonderful thing is the entire country is paying attention. And I think we've come to a time where the entire country, they're saying, why are we treating anyone as a second-class citizen? Why do we have these second-class marriages in some states and no relationship recognition in other states? That time has to stop. That is un-American. And I'm so proud of this country right now for recognizing that, paying attention, and saying to their leaders, hey, it's time. It's time to treat people fairly.
But I think tomorrow's going to be a better day for the proponents of same-sex marriage, because in the case of Proposition 8, I think you have a case where Justice Kennedy does not want to apply equal protection to all 50 states. DOMA is a case where the government is denying benefits to those who are already legally married in the 9 states that have same-sex marriage right now. What he is doing, and I think you will see DOMA invalidated, you will see Kennedy join with the other 4 liberals to cross the Rubicon on this equal protection case, and that, I think, is the most important thing that we can see legally for same-sex marriage advocates.
Dustin, Lance Black, and Chad Griffin, thank you for being our witnesses to history today, and Julian Epstein.